Coming up on Tech News today, more Moto X leaks. They're video ones this time. Is Thunderbolt becoming the next Firewire? And is that a good or a bad thing? And man sues Apple for porn. All that and more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, July 15th, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website, blog, portfolio, or online store. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com and use offer code TNT7. And by TechServe. TechServe assists U.S. businesses of all sizes with their technology needs, including Apple, Avid, Adobe, and HP solutions. Visit techserve.com/TNT and receive a complimentary iPad deployment assessment. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm Jason Howell.
And Ayaz Akhtar is off on vacation, but I'm not. I'm back. And,
Welcome back, Tom.
But I'm back. Let's start off with the top 10 stories of the day in the news feeds. Microsoft has cut the price of the 32-gigabyte Surface RT by $50, bringing the tablet down to $349. The 64-gig version got a bigger price drop, $150 down to $499. Unlike previous discounts, Microsoft is offering these in all markets indefinitely. Bloomberg previously reported that by mid-March, Microsoft had only sold one-third of the 3 million RTs produced.
Last week, Ma Elun, a 23-year-old woman from a province in China, was allegedly electrocuted when she answered a call on her iPhone 5 while it was charging. This is according to China-based Xinhua news agency. In an email statement to Reuters, Apple spokesperson said that the company is, quote, deeply saddened to learn of this tragic incident and offer our condolences to the Ma family. Apple also will fully investigate and cooperate with authorities on this matter.
iWatch hopefuls have more good news, but a longer wait. GigaOM passes along a Financial Times report that Apple has been hiring aggressively for the project in recent weeks. I'm imagining press gangs going after watch developers or something like that. Apple has hit upon some tough engineering problems, apparently, and that probably means a 2014 launch for any kind of Apple smartwatch.
Oh, but it gives us so much more time for rumors.
Yay!
Microsoft smartwatch production is a job for its Surface team. People who are familiar with Microsoft's plans tell The Verge. The Xbox accessories team previously was developing a prototype that would come with a heart rate monitor. We reported it earlier on Tech News Today. The upcoming device apparently runs on a modified version of Windows 8 that would allow for integration with other Windows devices. Plus, perhaps there would be cloud storage, as well as perhaps several different device colors. Surface team. Go for it.
Hey,
yeah.
How about more Moto X rumors?
How about them?
Ostroid reports on a Rogers video showing off the new Moto X phone previously seen in Eric Schmidt's hands. The video posted on Google Plus by Dima Pronyenko demonstrates how Moto X has always-on voice commands. All you got to do is say, "Okay, Google now," and boom, you get the ability to do a little voice search. Also, you get the ability to launch the camera by flicking your wrist twice, but don't throw it by mistake.
That's how you get RSI.
Yes, it is.
Apple and Samsung's relationship status remains complicated, since Samsung is not only, suing Apple a lot and competing against Apple with pretty good results, but also continuing to provide the chips that power iPhones. Samsung reportedly will supply Apple with A9 chips based on a 14-nanometer process node starting in 2015, the Korea Economic Daily reports today. The chip would go into production in 2015 and power an iPhone. Theoretically, it would be the iPhone 7 if it actually uses the same numbering conventions we're used to now, which could be released in the later half of next year.
I'm glad to see those two patching it up. I really was rooting for them. Sony's still paying for the devastating 2011 attack on the PlayStation Network. And earlier this year, the UK's Information Commissioner's Office fined Sony £250,000 for not being better prepared for the attack. Sony still doesn't think it deserves the fine, but it agreed to pay it anyway rather than disclose details about security procedures.
Speaking of security, 2 security experts have hacked into femtocells from Verizon. Tom Ritter and Doug DePerry demonstrated for Reuters how they can eavesdrop on text messages, photos, and phone calls made with an Android phone and an iPhone connected to a Verizon femtocell, and will demonstrate the technique at DEF CON and Black Hat. Verizon says it has updated the software of its femtocells to block these hacks.
Chris Sevier has filed a lawsuit against Apple in U.S. District Court in Nashville over the ability to see porn on Apple devices. I know. I didn't know this happened either. Sevier seeks damages and injunctive relief, specifically that all Apple devices be sold in safe mode from now on. Sevier alleges Apple's porn offering led to unfair competition between his wife and porn stars, which ultimately caused a deteriorating relationship. It's not a laughing matter, Sarah. He's made a video with his electronic music group in support of the lawsuit.
Unfair competition. I shouldn't have seen that. If you're HP, who would you want advice from? Apparently, cable TV, French fry makers, and Microsoft. HP announced today that it is adding 3 new members to its board. Robert R., otherwise known as Dob Bennett, former president and chief executive of Liberty Media Corporation; Ray Ozzie, former chief software architect of Microsoft and founder of new startup Tyco; and James A. Skinner, former VP, vice chairman, and CEO of McDonald's Corporation and current chairman of Walgreens. HB continues to search for a permanent non-executive chairman. Ralph V. Whitworth will continue to serve as chairman of the board on an interim basis.
This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a blog, a company website, a portfolio, whatever you need. If you want it to be reliable and you want it to look good, go to Squarespace. If you're like, no, actually, I want an unreliable, ugly website, maybe Squarespace isn't for you. But go check it out. Squarespace keeps rolling out new product features. We all want beautiful-looking websites, but not all of us are very good at design. I suck at design. That's why I use Squarespace for my books website and for Sword and Laser, because it makes us look brilliant. Like we have professional designers, because they are professionally designed. These are award-winning designs. And Squarespace has a 24/7 support team providing live chat during the week if you have any questions, extremely fast email support day and night, and plans start as low as $8 a month for software and hosting. Squarespace is a real value because you can get a domain name, get a host. You can't get a host for that cheap. Squarespace has an award-winning design team, not a good one anyway. Award-winning design team, as I said, and it's fast and easy to use. Everything's drag and drop. New page builder tool. It's not even new anymore. It's been around for a while. The layout engine enables you to customize pages in seconds by adding blocks of content. Makes adding videos to the website super easy. The editor tool allows selection of fonts, colors, customization. They also have an e-commerce solution. If you want to start a store, they've got a store. You can sell both physical and digital goods. And the best mobile experience. This is another thing I love. My websites look right on a phone screen, on a tablet screen, on a laptop screen, on a big 32-inch screen. I don't have to do nothing. They just automatically adapt intelligently to the screen they're displayed on. Squarespace integrates all your website needs into one platform. Domains, design, development, commerce, hosting, and 24/7 customer support. For a free trial, go to squarespace.com, sign up for a free account. You don't need a credit card. You don't need to give them anything but an email address. That's so they can send you the link to log in. Just try it out, start building your website. Then if you decide to purchase it, use offer code TNT7 and get 10% off your first purchase on new accounts. That includes monthly and annual plans. And don't forget, a free domain name comes with the annual plan subscription. That's squarespace.com. Use that offer code TNT7. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. We thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. Joining us now to discuss the stories of the day, very happy to welcome Simon Dingle from 5FM in South Africa back to the show. How's it going, Simon?
Good and you, Tom. Good to be back.
That's good to have you back. Let's start off talking about that Moto X phone that was rumored to be released in August. At least that's what this Rogers leaked video says. As we mentioned, it showed up on a guy's Google Plus page. And I kind of love this always on voice command. If we could show a little bit of the video, you can see it in action. And you basically, it's like Google Glass, except instead of OK Glass, you say OK Google Now. And it just responds with the Google Now. So now, apparently, OK Moto Magic has been leaked out as another way you would activate that. Maybe that was a prototype version of this.
It's taking forever to load.
It's taking forever to load. Okay. Yeah. A couple other things there: active updates, lock screen notifications, hand gestures to launch the camera. Simon, what do you think of this?
Yeah, it looks great. I'm yet to find a voice-powered service that works reliably. I'm not sure if it's my unusual accent that perhaps is the problem, but it's pretty brave to go out there and put a feature like this at the forefront. What I'm more interested in, though, is what comes with the Moto X in terms of these customizations that have been hinted at. Mike Elgin had a great article, I think it was 2 weeks ago on Computer World, talking about the commoditization wars between Google and Apple. And while how Google tries to differentiate very strongly and decommoditize its web services, Apple's in the opposite direction, trying to make web services less of a big deal and decommoditize hardware, which is interesting. But the Moto X kind of flips things around, and I'm trying to. It's just fun imagining what Google has up its sleeve or Motorola has up its sleeve in terms of these customizations. That to me is the more intriguing part of the whole Moto X package. The always-on voice commands are interesting, but I kind of need to see them in action before I make a call on how well that works out.
Yeah, I want to see it in action too. I want to see how this wrist twitch to launch the camera ends up working in reality.
It sounds clunky to me. It doesn't mean that it won't end up being something where we go, gosh, remember when we always had to click on some sort of a camera icon before we all got used to gestures? Maybe this is just the beginning of something that makes a lot more sense. But at least on paper, to me, I'm like, I don't really like the idea of that.
It smacks, the flicking the wrist thing smacks of Samsung's kind of customizations with TouchWiz that you can enable, that they always, tout at their presentations, that in the grand scheme of things aren't really necessarily like barn burners. You know what I mean? They don't take the world by storm and totally prove exactly why they exist. They're just something that you use a couple of times and you end up deactivating. But who knows? Who knows? I do have the voice command clipped so that we can at least play that. Here we go.
Okay, Google now. What's the forecast for today?
Today's forecast for Toronto is 25 degrees with a thunderstorm.
To use your Moto X, you only need your voice.
So the audio listeners, that probably wasn't as impressive, but she never touches the phone. She's on her computer and she just looks down at the phone and talks to it. I don't know. I mean, this is what you want when Motorola, a Google-owned company, comes out with its first big new phone since being bought by Google, don't you?
Absolutely. I can see this being super useful when driving, for example. That to me has been the killer feature for Siri.
Absolutely.
I guess hand gestures have been tainted in the past. We've seen Samsung do things like AirTouch, for example, which look kind of interesting until you play around with them and you're like, meh, I don't have a hole in my life in this shape.
Exactly.
But
I feel like
jury's out on those.
I feel like AirTouch is one of those demo-friendly features, but isn't really practical.
So is Face Unlock, and that was a Google, Android thing. But it was the big, one of the big things that was mentioned around Ice Cream Sandwich, and afterwards everybody was talking about, wow, this is an interesting way to unlock your phone. Does anyone use Face Unlock? No, but it makes an interesting presentation, and it's an interesting kind of point in a list. It's just not that usable on a daily basis.
I just wonder also how sensitive it is. I mean, are you inadvertently searching for things? If you say over your shoulder, like, okay, thanks, to somebody that brought you a coffee, and all of a sudden your phone's
Google
like, what do you want?
Prices. Oh, wait, what? Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is a common.
Oh yeah, all the time.
The dinner table. Let's move on to talking about Thunderbolt. Intel's Thunderbolt. Is it becoming the next Firewire? In other words, the better thing that loses out to USB?
Well, it sort of is starting to look that way, especially because Acer is basically abandoning Thunderbolt. You might remember that in 2012, Acer was the first Windows PC maker to say, okay, we're going to go all in on Thunderbolt. This is going to be a big deal. Jason Ziller, who's the director of Intel's client connectivity division, now says Thunderbolt is targeted towards premium systems. It's not targeted to be on mid-range or value systems in the next couple of years. However, just a couple of years ago, he said that Intel's goal for Thunderbolt was to be broadly deployed across most PCs within 3 to 5 years. Okay, well, we're not 5 years into that quote yet, but it doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, Acer spokeswoman Ruth Rosine says USB 3.0 is less expensive. It offers comparable bandwidth, charging for devices such as mobile phones, and has a large installed base of accessories and peripherals. I think many people, in the consumer world echo the same thing. It's like USB 3 is a standard. We've all got so many devices and peripherals that are already using it. Thunderbolt seems like, yeah, I mean, it has impressive speeds, and the daisy chaining effect is really great, but there's this chicken and egg problem, right? It's like if you don't make devices that utilize Thunderbolt, then you don't get more devices that utilize Thunderbolt, of course. Apple is probably the company that you, or at least I, equate most with a lot of Thunderbolt ports being built into devices. Obviously, MacBook Pros and iMacs, Mac Minis, MacBook Air computers. Later this year, the new Mac Pro has 6 Thunderbolt ports. And many say with the speeds like this, especially going back and forth, it's great for high-intensive video editing, perhaps with the introduction of more 4K video processing in the future. Thunderbolt would make a lot more sense. But, are we at the point now where we can't find good enough reasons to need Thunderbolt unless we're editing video, which many people never do? Simon, what do you think?
Well, you mentioned daisy chaining, Sarah, and that's an example of something that if you have a need for that kind of functionality, then this is going to be a no-brainer for you, right? This is currently the best technology for doing that kind of thing. But I mean, we've seen with 100 other standards that technical superiority does not equal adoption. So I fully agree with the sentiment that USB ultimately wins this if mass adoption is the criteria by which a standard would be winning. But Thunderbolt's not going anywhere. It's a great standard. It's already finding niches with professional users. We've mentioned video editors. For somebody who's gone and invested in drives and displays that enable daisy chaining, it's not going away for them. So, I'm a big fan of the standard, but I have to agree that USB is simpler, more affordable, easier for consumers to digest and understand. And I can't say that if I was an executive at Ace, I'd be making a different call right now.
I think we're seeing Firewire play out again in almost exactly the same way. The licensing for Thunderbolt is too expensive, and whether that's because the product itself is expensive to make or Intel's trying to rake in the money, I don't know for sure. I expect that if Intel could lower the licensing, it would. So I'm assuming it's that the light peak technology that underlies Thunderbolt is just expensive to make right now. And so Intel is saying, well, we can't take a loss on this to gain adoption. We can't compete with USB 3 on price, so we're going to reposition it as the quality, which it is. It is a higher quality, but so was Firewire and USB 1 essentially, because USB was cheaper and ubiquitous. So I definitely see that Thunderbolt's not going away. I agree with you, Simon, but it's going to be a niche product. That's what this signals to me anyway.
Absolutely. And if you're a vendor looking at implementing these technologies now, if you're attacking a niche for professional creatives, for example, then you're absolutely going to adopt the standard. But I can understand for the broader public, Acer not wanting to pay the licensing fees and incorporate this technology. Yeah,
exactly. All right. Well, enough of this serious Thunderbolt licensing talk. Let's talk about porn on Apple devices, because Chris Sevier is filed a complaint, as we mentioned in the news views, against Apple. The plaintiff respectfully demands that Apple sell all of its devices on safe mode with software preset to filter out pornographic content. And if you want to access legitimate adult content, you would have to contact Apple and get a password and prove you're over 18. He says if Apple agrees to sell its devices on safe mode before the trial, he will terminate this litigation. He claims his porn addiction started because of a simple typo. He was trying to access Facebook.com and just accidentally fell into a life of porn and then created this video with his electronic group Ghost Wars in support of the lawsuit. Apparently, this video is referenced many times throughout the document, and it includes. There's nothing NSFW in there. There's nothing not safe for work in there, but it's all clips from porn videos.
It's pretty risque.
So he obviously knew where to find the material now after his typo. Simon, is this just a guy trying to promote his band?
That's the theory I've developed in the last 2 minutes, Tom. The video is. The video is the headline, and the lawsuit is its marketing device. But I suppose it does hint at a problem technology's always had, and not just digital technology, is that, bread knives can be used to stab people. That doesn't mean that the stabbing of people is a problem with the bread knife. It's just something that technology is always going to be plagued with. If we're talking about sort of security, for example, it's easy to point a finger at what technology enables and fixate on that. I'm sorry, I can't take the story seriously. I'm trying to come up with a serious discussion here, but
I mean, it sounds like he doesn't want anything too outlandish, right? He's like, devices should just be shipped in safe mode, and then I'll just go away, and that'll be the end of it. And by the way, you should watch my, really cool music video for Ghost Wars. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, if you didn't mean to go to a particular address and you saw something that launched you into a life of porn addiction, well, okay, then what happens if you make a left down a street in a city when you should have made a right, and then you see somebody in their, bedroom, or, I mean, it's like...
Oh, you end up at North Beach where all the strip clubs are.
And you're like, I wanted to go to South Beach because I was trying to get to the Giants ballpark, and I'm going to sue the city because now I can't stay out of the strip club. I mean, that's all laughable stuff. I mean, this is an adult, right?
Yeah. And Apple
break.
has apparently not responded to this lawsuit.
Oh, I can't imagine Apple
Shockingly.
actually giving this lawsuit, half of a second of, its lawyer's time.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. And a clever way to get some views on your YouTube, although as YouTube comments are wont to do, they are mostly trolly, mostly pretty damn critical of the guy. So I'm not sure I guess all publicity is good publicity, right? So maybe he wins. I don't know.
I mean, do we think that there's any harm in a device saying, we're just going to go ahead and ship in safe mode because, I don't know, maybe there are kids in your house or that sort of thing. You just go ahead and turn it off if you want to.
The problem is that safe mode, right? I mean, what is safe mode? How do you actually create a filter that works well? I mean, sure, Google search has safe mode on by default. So his sort of like, well, I typed in the wrong URL. You don't want to ship a browser that by default blocks URLs. I've had my own sites that are not in any way involved with porn blocked on filters because of a misinterpretation of a headline,
right,
or this or that. So no, I don't want that. It's the internet. Yeah, it has to be used responsibly. The devices should be used by adults or children under supervision or after discussion of the rights and wrongs of the internet. But it's like the bread knife thing that Simon said. Although I would never stab someone with a bread knife. You just have to saw through them. That takes forever.
Yeah.
My bread, yeah.
But your wrist might
knife.
be so strong from, flicking twice to get the
The
camera
Moto
app
X,
to work.
yeah.
So maybe,
Nice callback.
it's all in the wrist.
It all comes together. Maybe he should sue Motorola or Microsoft or all the other people who make devices that serve.
Sue the internet.
I would sue the internet. In fact,
I
I'm going
sue
to.
Earth. You guys made me love porn. Watch my video.
Let's take a break and thank our other sponsor for today's show, TechServe, New York's premier authorized Apple reseller and technology provider. They've been serving creative professionals at all levels, Fortune 100 companies right down to you and me. And they carry a range of Apple products from iPhones, iPads, iMacs, MacBooks, iPods, and accessories. Range of partnerships with top vendors to facilitate flexible, efficient, and creative solutions. Whether you've got a small business or a huge enterprise, TechServe can assist you to deploy this stuff. I wish on my recent trip I had been going through LaGuardia or Toronto or Minneapolis because they have this amazing iPad thing in the Delta terminals there, where every seat in the terminal is equipped with an iPad. You can sit anywhere in the terminal, receive real-time flight updates, you don't have to cran your neck, see what the flight thing says. It's right in front of you. You can order food on it, play games, browse the internet, check your email. Over 1.5 million visitors use these iPads in Delta terminals just this past year, and TechServe is the company that worked with OT management to roll them out in the Delta terminals. They've turned to TechServe to provide, configure, and install the world's largest deployment of iPads, and you can use them too. If your business is considering integrating iOS technology at your workplace, you've got to contact TechServe today. Receive a complimentary iPad deployment assessment. Go to TechServe. It's TechServe.com/TNT. TechServe.com/TNT. And TechServe will help you assess your current or future iPad needs and give you advice to make it a success. If you're even thinking, I was thinking about putting some iPhones in the workplace or some iPads, go to TechServe.com/TNT. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Today. All right, more Apple news. Reportedly, as we heard in the news fuse, they're getting back together with Samsung, or at least they're talking again.
Yeah, so Samsung is the exclusive manufacturer of Apple's A-series processors, like the current A6 chip, for example. But we've heard about Apple trying to reduce its chip orders for Samsung because it wants to diversify supply lines, reduce dependence on any one manufacturer, but specifically because obviously Apple and Samsung have an extremely weird relationship these days. I mean, Samsung's providing chips that Apple needs, in effect, for its most popular product line. At the same time, the two sue each other all over the world, and Samsung makes competing smartphones that have really eaten into Apple's market share. The report that comes from the Korea Economic Daily says Samsung looks like it's going to be exclusive for a while. It'll supply Apple with A9 chips based on that 14-nanometer process node starting in 2015. The chips would go into production in 2015. The first iPhones that they should power would be the iPhone 7s. Now, the story is that Apple reportedly tried to get exclusive access to TSMC smartphone chips by making a $1 billion investment offer, which was rejected by TSMC. This is reported by Bloomberg. Apparently, TSMC also rejected a similar bid from Qualcomm. So it's not as if Apple is not trying its best to figure out, okay, well, who can we jump to that's not Samsung? Apple reportedly also exploring a possible deal with chipmaker Global Foundries to produce future chips. But at least in the near future, it looks like Samsung is the way to go. But the whole thing is, I don't know. I mean, I just don't see how the two can keep such a tight partnership unless these lawsuits really do wind down. They figure out how to both be industry leaders as far as smartphone markets go and play nice, but that doesn't sound realistic either. Simon, what do you think is the best move for Apple?
I don't see an alternative to working with Samsung at the moment. They may be a crappy competitor by Apple's assessment of the company, but they're a fantastic partner when it comes to manufacturing components. It would be silly, in my opinion, for Apple not to be using Samsung. Does the war front being fought elsewhere affect that partnership? I don't see why it has to. If you're going to treat this like adults, you've got business and you've got business, and I don't see why Apple shouldn't be using Samsung for components. Besides for the personal and the ethics and all of the other things that may enter into the heads of the people making these decisions. On paper, it just makes sense that they stay with Samsung for now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Apple can't quit Samsung. It's not a joke. They literally cannot. I know they would like to, and that's the problem with megalopolises like this or whatever. What is it called? Conglomerates. Where you have them doing so many things. I'm sure that the Samsung chip department doesn't want to lose Apple as a client. That's a big source of income for them. So they're kind of at cross purposes with themselves, and yet Apple apparently cannot find somebody that can give them as good a quality of a chip at a price that they can agree on. And that's what Tim Cook is best at, is managing these supply chain issues.
And the fact that there is healthy competition between two such ginormous companies in the sector means that they're also mitigating the risk of antitrust and other anti-competitive kind of legal actions that could be taken against either one of them. So, while it might not be the slickest of situations for either companies, I think it has its pluses for them too.
All right, let's move on to Hulu. Just after your show on Friday, Hulu owners decided to keep the company. They said, you know what? We're rejecting all of you. All of you. They're going to invest $750 million to, quote, propel future growth. Chase Carey, who's the president and COO of 21st Century Fox, one of the co-owners of Hulu, along with Comcast and Disney. But don't forget that Comcast can't say or do anything because of their purchase of NBC Universal. So they're out of this. It's basically Disney and Fox calling the shots. Chase Carey said, we believe the best path forward for Hulu is meaningful recapitalization that will further accelerate its growth under the current ownership structure. We had meaningful conversations with a number of potential partners and buyers, each with impressive plans and offers to match. But with 21st Century Fox and Disney fully aligned, in our collective vision. I think that's the important part of this. We are fully aligned. We're not going to go two different directions anymore. We decided to continue to empower the Hulu team, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Bloomberg reports Time Warner still wants in, that they're still talking to Time Warner about buying a stake, maybe becoming a fourth owner of Hulu. But most of the reports are, it sounds like what Chase Carey's saying is Hulu wants to be Netflix. And what do we think about this, Simon? I know Hulu's probably not as big of a concern for you since you can't get it in South Africa, but it is sort of setting the precedent of how television is going to come to the internet, along with places like the BBC iPlayer and others. What's your outside perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult one. Hulu isn't officially available in South Africa, and neither are most of the services that specifically provide television content. So we've got a lot of streaming movie services, including on iTunes. What we don't have is the television stuff. So it's kind of interesting from the outside seeing how Hollywood's kind of moving ahead with getting its content to the rest of the world outside of the USA, while the television folk are kind of lagging behind. And I guess their business is different, right? So they've got these airtime windows, and they've got a lot of middlemen, broadcasters around the world that they need to factor into this decision making. But I, from the outside, have to hope that some of the $750 million includes plans to get Hulu to the rest of the world. And there's a massive coup waiting there, because if they can jump Netflix and other services like this to Europe and emerging markets, I think that would probably be good for them. When it comes, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to look at what the best move is for customers. Are we happy with what Fox and Disney are proposing, as little as we know about it, as Hulu customers? And that's difficult for me to comment on that. So I'm not sure how you guys feel with your access to Hulu, that these are the right people to be running, a service that's perhaps this significant for the future of television.
I mean, this sounds to me a lot more like, and yes, we talked about a potential Hulu sale and who would buy Hulu all of last week. And of course, Friday afternoon, it's like, yeah, forget it. Hulu people say, we're good. We're just going to give them a little bit more.
It's like the Bachelorette saying nobody gets a rose.
Right, yeah. I've thought a lot about everything that you've offered me and some very attractive people. However, I choose
We've had
death
meaningful
as an
conversations. But
right. I mean, this sounds to me like the Hulu executives met with a lot of potential buyers, and nobody gave Hulu the amount of money that Hulu current team thinks it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, the TV networks don't want to run Hulu anymore. They want to run their own content companies. That's why they were trying to get rid of this. They made it as a way to compete with YouTube, and it's ended up being successful on its own. Forget about YouTube. It has nothing to do with YouTube. They're almost in different markets in a way anymore. And now they don't know what to do with it. They want to sell it, but they don't want to give licensing guarantees to anybody who might buy it, because they want to hoard all that for themselves. And in fact, there's questions of whether they'll continue to give good licensing deals to themselves as they continue to run.
Day after premiere programming, for example, which doesn't matter so much to me, but a lot of people depend on that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I feel like this is bad news for Hulu as a company. It's probably not that big of a deal for consumers, but I think somebody could have done something much cooler with Hulu if it had gotten away from the broadcast network's control. But maybe Time Warner will buy in. I know Comcast is hobbled, but that would be 2 cable companies along with 3 networks, because Comcast owns NBC Universal in there. Time Warner owns some networks as well. That could be interesting if they brought them into the fold, and Hulu's path forward might be as the Netflix of current television or broadcast television.
It would also be nice to know exactly how the company plans to invest that $750 million that they throw around to propel future growth. Okay, well, like what? What exactly?
Yeah, and compare that to Amazon spending $1 billion a year on Amazon Instant Prime, and Netflix spending $2 billion a year on content.
Exactly.
It's almost a pittance when you compare it that way. And this isn't every year. This is just a one-time investment. Well, let's go on to Radiohead pulling their music out of Spotify.
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting story. Again, Radiohead's Tom York, he's the front man. And producer Nigel Godrich, who also produces his band Atoms for Peace, have removed their albums from music streaming services like Spotify and RDO and Deezer. And they say it's bad for new music. So it's not necessarily, I mean, Tom York is, you could argue that Radiohead, although it's not exactly mainstream as in top 40 music. It's pretty well known.
It's pretty popular.
Yeah, Tom York's, he has an individual album, maybe a little bit less known. Albums for Peace, maybe a little less known. I didn't actually know that he even fronted that band until I read the story this morning. But he's a well-known artist. Now, Godrich, the producer, says the music industry is being taken over by the back door. If we don't try and make it fair for new music producers and artists, then the art will suffer. Make no mistake, these are all the same industry bods trying to get a stranglehold on the delivery system. The numbers don't even add up for Spotify yet, but it's not about that. It's about establishing the model, which will be extremely valuable. He's saying this model is still kind of in its infancy. We're still trying to figure out how it matters for artists. And if you're a new artist, forget it. You're never going to be seen. You're certainly not going to be getting the kind of royalty rates that you've enjoyed in the past with the music download model, because of course the streaming models are about getting a smaller piece of the pie each time your music is streamed, rather than a slightly larger piece each time your music is downloaded. And of course, that's not song by song. It's more of an album type of a case. Tom York also on Twitter was pretty much reiterating the same thing, saying we're pretty much taking a stand. It's the principle. Kieran Hebden, who records under the name Fortet, which is actually I really like that band. You may or may not have heard of that band. Also tweeted that he's removed music from these services. So at this point, it still seems like a couple of isolated artists saying, we don't like this model. We're going to take a stand for the smaller artists who are just trying to make a name for themselves out there. I don't know. I mean, we had we've had quite a bit of talk lately about record companies wanting to paint Pandora as a bully to artists, trying to get around paying the royalty rates that have traditionally been necessary. Artists now are saying, a streaming model like Spotify or Rdio is just really bad for artists. But more people than ever use the streaming model. I'm one of those people. I love the streaming model. I mean, for music discovery, it can't be beat for me. I think it's absolutely worth my money. But at the same time, I don't want to feel like I'm screwing over artists, especially ones that are less well known. Simon, what do you think is the sweet spot here?
Well, I mean, that's really the key, right? Is finding that sweet spot between what Spotify is doing and a more conventional model. I love the fact that you've got a guy like Tom York, though, who really has little to gain from defending new artists. Perhaps he's got a business perspective on it, but he's not an artist who's ever going to have trouble selling his music, standing up and defending new artists, which really have no voice in the whole scene. But I used to do some work with musicians, and I think the most difficult thing, if you are a new artist trying to make it in the world, right, you're less worried about the royalty situation and how much you're getting paid for people listening to your music or downloading it. And you're more worried about getting as many people as possible engaging with what you're doing, because that's what gets you exposure. That's what gets you more sales in the long term. And more importantly, that's what gets feet through the door to your shows, because that's where you're really going to make money. Doesn't matter if you're Tom York or M&M or a startup band in a garage somewhere, the real money comes from shows, right? You'll always make royalties, but the real money comes from shows. So exposure to me is more important for new artists. So when we find the sweet spot, I guess it needs to put the exposure first. And yes, the royalties are key. But it's really that discovery of new music that I would be more concerned about as an artist.
Yeah, it's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle at this point as well, right? Because, for the past 10, 12 years, you have kids who have grown up experiencing digital music through, starting with Napster and then ending up, torrenting and then downloading through, or streaming rather, through things like Spotify. It's probably very difficult, if not impossible, to force them to go back to other methods that might be good. I think you're exactly right, Simon. It's all about exposure for new artists. So when Tom York is saying that he's doing this for new artists to kind of pave a better way for them, he misses part of the point, which is those new artists want to be on these services, because if they're not on these services, then they're missing out on a lot of potential listens, just based on the fact that so many of the current generation turn to these services to discover new music. And if they're not there, they're not discovering them, period.
Yeah, and that's especially true of Pandora.
Mm-hmm. I pitched this as Radiohead, and it's not. It's Tom York and two of his albums. But Radiohead has gone and put their albums up as a pay what you want. So I don't think this is about the money. I think it's about control. And you guys are totally right about exposure. But I think what Tom York's trying to point out is the control of what gets put out there, how it gets put out there, how much it's charged for is in the companies, it's in the labels, and he doesn't want them to control it anymore. He's trying to pull it out.
At the same time, though, I mean, you used the example that Radiohead did, a sort of pay your own way model. It was for their album In Rainbows. They made a ton of money because Radiohead is beloved by millions of people, and so a lot of people said, well, I'm not just going to download it for free. I'm going to give you $5 or $10. But Radiohead has been in the industry a really long time. Now, I'm not saying that Tom York and companies' hearts are not in the right place. I'm sure that they really, really do care about emerging artists. At the same time, they are in a position to be able to say, we don't need Spotify. We certainly, we can put out an album tomorrow and put it up on the internet for free, and we're still going to make money because people trust us and we've made a name for ourselves. So it's a little, I think it's easy to say, hey, don't use these models because they're bad for artists when you've already enjoyed the rewards of
but at the same time, you need somebody like Tom York's stature to pave the way to get a better deal for the newer artists. So you could argue that he's doing this for the benefit of those artists so that they can get exposure without getting ripped off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm
Tom,
just not sure how much it's going to change people's behavior. Go ahead, Simon.
You hinted at something that is key when you talk about Tom York, though, because Radiohead has been at odds with the industry, very openly battling against the EMI until not too long ago. So I think there is some chip of the shoulder going on with Tom York. He has a vendetta against the music industry and the major labels.
Definitely. All right, let's finish up with a randomizer. NASA is testing a 3D printed rocket engine fuel injector. That's right. This is not on a MakerBot machine in their back, though. This is pretty sophisticated stuff. Aerojet Rocketdyne is the company. The technique involves turning a computer-designed object into a real-world part by controlling a high-powered laser beam, which melts and fuses thin layers of metallic powders into the preordained shape. But then they've tested it. It works. You could print out a freaking rocket engine, and it saves them a lot of money, apparently.
Wow.
Print me out a spaceship.
What, is there no end to what we can 3D print?
I know, right? They're going to be printing
Get
out
Tom York on the
podcasters
case. Is this,
soon.
is this helping the rockets?
You're going to print out Tom York clones before we know it. All right, let's see what's on the calendar.
Yahoo's earnings report is tomorrow. That's July 16th. It actually coincides nicely with Marissa Meyer's one-year anniversary as the CEO of Yahoo. I'm sure she didn't plan it that way.
No.
But it works out pretty nicely. You can have a big party if the earnings are good. Probably have a big party even if the earnings aren't very good. And tomorrow also AT&T has that whole want to show us what's next little gathering. So we'll find out a lot more about what they are unveiling tomorrow.
AT&T has that, oh crap, T-Mobile and Samsung and Nokia and everybody's having events. We should have one too.
Yeah. Come see what's next. Something will be next.
We don't know what it is. We'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
Got an email from Grant who writes, I'm all for robots being the ones going to war, as long as they fight other robots. How much cooler would it be to solve all of our conflicts by having our robots fight each other on some neutral ground and not mess up anybody's cities or kill any actual people? It would never happen, but it'd still be pretty cool. He says, also, and the Len Peralta illustrations, which is Len Peralta does this, our drawings of our stories each Friday. He says, I would love to be able to go back and see them without downloading the video version. I listen to the audio version on my commute to and from work. Since I drive, the video version isn't a good option for me. Adding a link to them in the show notes would be very cool.
Well, we'll talk to Len about that. See if we can get him to upload them, and then we can link to him pretty easily.
Yeah.
I think he's not sure everybody wants to see them all, but we can tell him, well, Grant wants to see them, Len. Okay.
It seems like
I'm way more interested in Robot Wars.
Yeah, the Robot Wars thing is actually totally what everyone would like. Whether you can actually do that to the satisfaction of parties involved, because it's kind of organized war, and so anybody who wants to go around the rules of war isn't going to play, and keep the robots from turning on us.
Well, and we need to think about production value, because it's no good having Robot Wars if you can't observe them from your couch, which is, what we design all technology to keep us on.
Yeah. Totally televised. That's going to be on CNN, Sky News, all those places. David says he just watched episode 794 on his Nokia. And again, you all dismissed the Windows Phone due to lack of apps, this time without IAS, who at least knew something about Windows Phone and its great features. The talk of apps missing was really over-exaggerated. I don't miss or use Google Apps, and you wouldn't either. Outlook is great. SkyDrive is awesome. Bing is getting better all the time. Nokia Maps work great, as do the third-party apps for YouTube, Instagram, etc. What else? The tile interface is so much better than the dated, non-informative icons of iOS, and I find more stable and consistent than the Android phones I've used in the past. Give Windows Phone a chance. Just dismissing every new Windows Phone due to the lack of apps is not accurate. Has the apps, and it should get more accurate coverage because it is a great OS for phones.
Well,
Cheers,
I think he's talking about the same episode where we talked about how a bunch of apps came to Windows Phone. So I'm not exactly sure why we seemed like we were talking about how there aren't any apps. We had a specific story about how there were some really interesting, crucial apps that had just come to Windows Phone, Flipboard being one of them.
We got several other
Friday?
emails.
Maybe it was Thursday.
It was Friday, apparently. He says it was Friday.
Well, my goodness, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to be more pro Windows Phone.
It's also why we take emails, so that you can represent David's view. And he obviously is a fan of the Windows Phone, and that's good. They need fans.
Well, it's also good to know that if someone is using Windows Phone and I say things like, well, it doesn't have the, it's 400,000 apps fewer than, the Android store. It's probably more than that. You can have somebody saying, yeah, but it doesn't matter. All the apps that are missing aren't apps that I need anyway. So there. That's also good to remember.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for writing in. TNT@twit.tv. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you, Simon Dingle, for joining us. SimonDingle.com, the best place to follow you. Anything else you got going on you want to tell folks about?
Oh, man, too much, actually. Still burning on it at FinWeek Magazine, 22/7, where I'm involved in the product development. But it's all at the site, SimonDingle.com. Thanks for having me, guys. It was great hanging out again.
Yeah, definitely. Always good to have you back. We'll have you back soon. And good internet this time. Didn't want to say anything to curse it, but also, which is freaking internet. I'm suing the internet.
Yes.
That is it for us. You can find us at our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com. There's a place where you can let us know what stories you'd like us to cover. Maybe more Windows Phone stories. I don't know. Go in there and submit it. See if you can get other people to vote it up to the top or vote down the stories you don't like. You can do all of that stuff. technewstoday.reddit.com. You can find us on the web at twit.tv/TNT. Email us, TNT@twit.tv, as I mentioned, and give us a call, 260-TNT-SHOW. Larry Dignan from ZDNet joins us tomorrow. We'll see you then.